Good morning. Welcome to the 16th Annual Caregiver Conference. I'm grateful to be here with you, and I am a big believer in gathering together with others who are having similar experiences. There's so much good to be had in recognizing that we are not alone in this world. We need connection with others, and to be able to connect with others who are having like experiences is especially powerful. So thank you for coming today. I hope your whole conference experience is wonderful. I wish I could see your faces, and I can't. But please know that I've been thinking about you for months, hoping that something I say today might be helpful for you. I hope you have something to write on in case you hear or feel something that you'd like to retain. I also hope that you'll ask questions or share feelings in the chat that I will address with the help of Jerry throughout my message today. I will never forget the day my husband and I had moved back to Utah after living in Hawaii and Minnesota for several years. We'd invited some of our friends to come visit, and we were having a great time. My friend Robin was sharing with us that her mother had quite recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she and her family were learning how to deal with the loss and how to help her mother with these different aspects of her life. I began to tell Robin and our friends about my grandma Stevens, who also had Alzheimer's, but had passed away at this point. As I was sharing some of the funny experiences that we had with Grandma, I got up from the couch so that I could mimic some of the behaviors that she would do. I could hear my friends laughing behind me, and I was laughing. And when I turned around to go sit back down on the couch, I looked at my friend Robin, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I was sick. I tried to apologize, and she tried to share what she was feeling, but you could tell that it was very hard to do. It would be safe to say that I had never imagined until that point that there are many different ways to deal with the grief that comes when a loved one is literally losing the ability to function or think on their own. This is a loss that few can understand unless they've been through it. Truthfully, for me, I was young, and we laughed a lot at the things that my grandma would say and do. I can see now that that was how my mom and dad, and because of them, my 6 siblings and I chose to deal with it. Hence, I thought that's how everyone dealt with it. Boy, did I learn a valuable lesson that night. Loss is hard. Change is hard for many, and there aren't right or wrong feelings as we work through loss. I feel grateful today to be able to share with you some tools that may help you as you do this very important work of caregiving. Caring for someone who cannot care for themselves is great and terrible and affects everyone involved. When my parents moved to Provo after spending most of their life to that point on the farm, they literally traded the farm for a house in the city. Picture the Clampetts, remember the Beverly Hillbillies, with Grandma in the back seat. It was pretty similar, coming from the farm to the city, minus the striking oil part. My grandma, who'd been widowed a few years earlier, moved about a mile away from us in Provo to her own condo. She started to lose her memory at the age of 62, shortly after my grandpa had passed away. And she wanted to be close to her daughter, my mother, who was moving to the city. She'd always wanted to live in the city, and Provo was as big as it was going to get for her. In the beginning, and for many years, she was able to live on her own. As she started to get progressively worse, she needed to spend much more time at our house, and truthfully, she didn't want to be there. If we weren't paying full attention to her, she wanted to go home. So she would stand in front of this ceiling to floor window in our family room that faced the street in front of our house. And she would say, "Janet, just point me the way and I will walk home." We would coax her away from the window and try to convince her to stay. Over and over again, she would commit to stay, come and sit back down with us, or help one of us with a job. Mom always had a basket of unmatched socks that she would throw out on the floor and ask her to match. But she would eventually find herself back at the window, looking out at the street, saying, "Janet, point me the way and I'll walk home." Sometimes we would let her start walking, and my mom would assign one of us kids to follow her until my mom or someone else could jump in the car to take her home. Show me the way and I'll walk home. I'm wondering if each of you could imagine yourselves standing in front of a window, feeling overwhelmed, unsure, unseen, tired, and thinking very consciously, show me the way to care for this person that I love. Show me the way to alleviate her pain. Show me how to feel more love for him as I care for him. Show me the way to stop feeling guilt or shame about not being enough. Show me the way. The theme for the conference today is finding joy in the journey. It's such a nice thought. And I know for me, I've had times in my life where I was going through something very painful, and I would hear someone say, find joy in the journey, or your life is what you make it. And to be honest, I just wanted to punch him in the face. You have no idea what you're talking about, I would think. Why don't you try this experience on for size and see how much joy you feel? I know, that was me in victim thinking, but I truly did not understand how to take my circumstance and find joy in it. Is it really a choice? When you were dreaming about and planning your life as children and young adults, I'm guessing the very few of you, if any, imagine being a caregiver for your spouse or parent or someone else that you love. And yet here you are. How do you reconcile what you expected and what is your reality? I'm going to share some tools with you today that hopefully you can take away and will be a resource and a help to you in the future. Tool number 1, be willing to accept and surrender the change in your loved one. Again, nice words, but how do we do that? Feel the loss of your expectations. Feel the loss of the person that they once were. And by saying that, I'm not suggesting that the person they are now is not wonderful, just different. Feel the loss of the personality that they once had, of the relationship that you once had and you wish you still had. Will you acknowledge that it hurts? There are no right or wrong feelings. Feelings are just feelings, and feeling is healing. Acknowledge that things are going to be different and that it's uncomfortable. Many of us have learned not to feel. Some of you may be wondering, well, for heaven's sake, what good would feeling bad about it do? I'm not suggesting you feel bad about it. I'm suggesting that you let yourself feel whatever emotions come up for you. Are you afraid to let yourself feel? Many of us likely learned when we were young that feelings just get in the way, so don't have them. Maybe we were ridiculed or punished for our feelings. So instead of allowing yourself to feel through an emotion, which helps to release pain, often the only thing we feel is numb or exhausted. That's a coping strategy that we learned somewhere along the way. And maybe it was helpful to get us through some painful experiences in the past. However, if we want to be able to find and feel joy in our everyday experiences, we have to be willing to feel the pain as well. So numb isn't really helpful anymore. As a life coach, I have a very common experience when new clients come into my office. They start to tell me about themselves, and usually they've come to me because they're having some sort of difficulty in their life that they don't know how to work through. They will share with me the details of their experiences, and then when I ask them how that feels, they'll look at me like I just asked them a ridiculous question. So I'll ask them again, how did that feel? Or how do you feel today about that? They will often say, I don't know. Haven't really thought about how I feel about it. So I'll ask them to try and connect a few feelings with their experience. The most common words they use to explain their feelings is, I feel good, or I feel bad. Or sometimes they let themselves feel sad. I gently tell them that good and bad are not feelings. And then we laugh, and then I'll say, or they will say, I'm having a really hard time explaining how I feel. So what I usually do is hand them a sheet of paper, just a full 8.5 by 11 that has descriptive words, descriptive feeling words. And after they look on at those words on that sheet, they're able to share some emotions that they feel around their experience. Many of my clients do not appreciate this because as soon as they connect an emotion to their experience, they usually begin to cry, and they don't want to cry. I feel so happy to tell them what I just told you. Feeling is healing. Crying is cleansing. Many people think that if they let themselves feel, they will never recover. Or it's very possible, as a caregiver, you may feel guilty about some of the thoughts and feelings you have. Maybe frustration, anger, irritation, a wish that this would end. That all makes sense to me. And if you push it away, try to suppress it, and pretend that you don't feel those things, you will bring more pain into your experience than if you just allowed yourself to feel the feeling. I once heard someone say that feelings last about 90 seconds and then suggested you consider it like you're riding a wave onto the beach. Feel the feelings, ride the wave, and it will place you right on the sand. Imagine laying there for a few seconds to recover from the feeling. Then you brush yourself off and you go on with your day. If you refuse to feel the pain or loss that comes with watching and helping someone you love as they begin to change, you will have a very hard time feeling joy. So tool number 1, choose to feel and be willing to accept or surrender the change in your loved one. I've said it already, and I'll say it again before I'm done today, but caregiving is hard. It can be hard. Sometimes when we choose to be a caregiver for someone else, or we feel that it was put upon us, meaning that we didn't or wouldn't really choose it, but we are the only one in their life who's willing or able to do it, it's easy to feel like a victim. Victim thinking creates a low to high grade feeling of resentment towards the person we are caring for, or for the persons who are not helping us care for the person that we are caring for. I know there came a point where my mom's sister and only sibling that had been helping her with grandma said that it was too hard and she wasn't going to help her anymore. I can't remember if my mom was upset about that, but I sure remember going into victim thinking about it. It didn't seem fair to my mom and frankly to us kids. That meant that she was going to be at our house 24/7 all year round. Victim thinking might also feel like we never get a break or others don't understand all that we are going through. Victim thinking creates a heaviness in our life that feels unchangeable or even unmanageable. Victim thinking causes us to literally feel like a victim to our circumstance or experience. I remember when my children were young and I dreaded my day when I had to drive carpool. That meant that I had to be done with whatever I was doing 30 minutes earlier than I would have if I weren't driving carpool. I was lamenting to one of my friends about this, and she looked at me kind of puzzled and said, "Oh, I love the days that I get to drive carpool. I get to see my children interact with their friends, and I get to hear their chatter just as they leave from school. That's where you get all the good info." Wait, what was she saying? How could the two of us feel so different about the same job? I wanted to feel what she felt, but I didn't know how. I thought this was just me. I was just born not liking to drive the carpool, not liking to drive kids to and from school, like somehow it was just in my genes. Well, that's the power of victim thinking. Victim thinking tells me that I don't have choices. Victim thinking tries to convince me that others are a burden and they are taking advantage of me. Victim thinking says life isn't fair, my needs don't matter, and of course, something bad is happening to me. This is an important piece to understanding our feelings. My thoughts create my feelings, and then I act according to those feelings. I could choose how I wanted to feel about driving the carpool by what I chose to think. That is a pretty powerful principle. will you take a minute and just consider, what do you think about caregiving? I'm just going to give you a second. What are common thoughts you have about the responsibility of caregiving or the person or people that you are caring for? Just take a second and think about that. What do you think about caregiving? I can't see the chat, but if there's anything in there that would feel helpful that we can share, that'd be great. And if not, just think about it. Now notice, how do those thoughts affect you? How do they affect how you feel? And then ultimately, how you act or behave? Does a lot of your energy go to managing those thoughts and feelings? You'd be normal if it did. And the truth is that victim thinking creates very destructive feelings, and it keeps us from being able to connect with ourselves, our higher power, with others and those we love the most. My daughter and her family moved back to Utah recently. I flew to Florida to pick up my 1- and 2-year-old granddaughters so that my daughter and son-in-law could drive their car and belongings home in peace. So go ahead, picture me, Grandma Honey, with 2 children, a double stroller, 2 backpacks, and a potty training seat for the 2-year-old that won't sit on a normal toilet seat. Just imagine how every person that was within 20 rows of us, forward and backwards, felt when they saw me walking onto that plane. About 4 hours into a 4.5-hour flight, after the 1-year-old had cried almost nonstop for at least 2.5 hours, the man sitting across the aisle from me, who a few times throughout the flight had asked if there was anything he could do to help me, asked me for my email address. When I landed, I found in my email a poem about the beauty of a crying baby. What? I was stunned at his choice to not feel like a victim in that experience. It would have been justified for sure, and heaven knows that I have felt like a victim to many crying children on airplanes. But he chose to see this experience and this baby as a precious human who was needing consoling. I was stunned by his emotional maturity. Remember, we move to victim thinking because we are unwilling to just feel the real emotion.
Kristi?
Mm-hmm.
We have some comments. So one person said she feels burdened. One says, I wouldn't want anyone else to care for my husband because I know him best and know how best to comfort him. And another one says, I feel it's unfair because it's keeping me away from my own children and grandchildren on the other side of the country.
Yeah, those are such valid feelings. Such valid feelings. They are so real. We're going to talk about what to do with those feelings and those thoughts. Thank you for sharing. Tool number 2, notice when you've moved to victim thinking and choose something different. It might be something as simple as this. Instead of, I have to go take care of mom, it might sound like this. I am choosing to go take care of mom. I love her, and I'm grateful that I have the strength to do it. I invited a handful of individuals who are caring or who have been caregivers for someone they love to share with me some of their thoughts, feelings, and experiences. I was so touched by what they shared. Their honesty and vulnerability as they were sharing their experiences almost felt sacred. Kathleen started by telling us that she and her husband built an apartment in their home so that her mother could move in with them. She felt happy about that choice and then quickly realized that it felt like all day and all night pressure to have her mother there. She became very dependent on me, Kathleen shared. She never wanted me to leave or go anywhere without her. I would sneak out my front door when I wanted to go play tennis with my friends because her room was over the garage and she would know if I had left, if I went through the garage. I felt trapped. My mom was angry at everyone and everything, said Susan. I worried about her all the time and yet had very little ability to help her. I felt judged by family members and others. My husband told me that I needed to be Teflon tough so that what others said or thought about me wouldn't hurt. I couldn't let what others were thinking about me, thinking or saying about me, drag me down. Kathleen interrupted and said, Teflon tough didn't work for me. It was so hard not to take things personally. I didn't feel seen. Lisa breaks in and says quietly, I didn't see my sister who was caring for our mother. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Can you relate to these feelings that each of these women were sharing? Regret, fear, pain, loss of freedom, loss of time, loss of the loved one they once knew, loss of time with their grandchildren and other spaces that they might want to be sharing or spending their time. These are real thoughts and real feelings. Tool number 3, validate the feelings, yours and those that you are caring for. Sometimes we'd be watching TV or in a conversation, and out of nowhere, my grandma would say, I'm dating him. We'd look at her and say, what? Who are you dating? That man. What's his name? She would ask, Larry Bird or Bob Barker, depended what we were watching or looking at, talking about. Yep, I'm dating him. Sometimes we would ask, well, Grandma, what happened to Grandpa? I don't know, but I'm dating Larry Bird. Instead of correcting her, we would validate her. Validation says, I see you, I hear you, I love you, without saying those words. Oh, well, he seems like a nice guy, we would say. Or we'd ask, what did you do for your last date? Getting curious, acknowledging the comment, smiling, nodding your head as they speak. I see you, I hear you, I love you. Validation. Lisa is helping to care for a friend. Dan, he was in a bike accident and is an incomplete paraplegic, meaning that he has no use of his limbs. He can walk with help because his mind helps move his legs. However, he has no feeling in his body. She and a few other friends are great help for his wife, who has been overwhelmed by how constant the work is to care for him. Lisa and her friends were sitting with Dan and his wife talking about the upcoming week. Lisa said, I will walk Dan on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. This was far from the first time that she had agreed to walk Dan. And he finally turned to her and said, Lisa, will you please stop saying that? I am not a dog. You don't need to walk me. Please just walk with me. Validation looks and sounds like you matter. You are important. You are not less than because you now think or do less. You can validate without ever saying a word. Remember the airplane flight that I was on with my sweet granddaughters? About halfway through the flight, Blakely, the 1-year-old, was uncomfortable and crying. Haven, the 2-year-old, was perched between me and the seat in front of me, needing something from me. When I glanced up for just a moment and saw the lady that was sitting up one row and to the right across the aisle from me, she made eye contact with me and gave me a warm and tender smile. It instantly brought tears to my eyes, and obviously still does. To be seen and heard is to heal. Please don't forget to validate your own feelings. Feelings are not good or bad. They are just feelings. Validating your own feelings would sound something like this. It makes sense that I'm tired. I've had a full day of caring for him. It's normal for me to wish that I could give more time to my parents who are getting more and more needy. Of course, I feel sad. I miss the long walks and talks we used to have. It's understandable that I feel alone. I'm the only one helping right now. Validation. Okay, let's recap so far and see if you have any questions. Tool number 1, choose to feel and accept or surrender the loss of certain hopes or dreams or expectations. Tool number 2, recognize victim thinking and remember how destructive it is to ourselves and our relationships, and then choose a different thought. Tool number 3, validate the individual's feelings, yours and those that you are caring for. Okay, moving on. I do hope that you will continue to just write down on your own pad of paper thoughts and feelings that are coming for you as you think about the ones that you.
Kristi,
Yes,
would you like to hear some more comments?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Okay.
Jerry.
So one says, I feel like we picked each other for better or worse. He'd do this for me and I'm here for him. One says, Teflon tough is hard to do when your work and home life are all caregiving. Another says, I feel guilty that I'm not as patient as I'd like to be.
Yeah.
I get that one.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway, so those are the 3 that came in.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I wish I could see your faces and actually just grab you and give you a hug. I feel emotional just hearing your honest reflection of this incredible work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing. In our basement, my mom had put photos of each of her 7 children up on the wall. My grandma would walk past them, smiling and talking to the photos. And every time she came upon my brother Robert's senior picture, I actually have it here, but it's small. So I'm going to see if you can see it, and with a few of his other pictures, but let's see if you can see that. Can you see this picture of him? There he is. This one is the one I'm talking about. Every time she come up, okay, good. Every time she'd come upon that picture, it's a senior picture. Obviously, he wasn't smiling. He's kind of got that cool look going on. But she would stop at the picture and she would say to whoever she was walking with, what is wrong with him? And why is he in such a bad mood? We laughed because Robert was a happy person in real life. My grandma just couldn't differentiate between a photo and a living person. I want to show you my grandma, by the way. I keep talking about her. Can you see her? Her name was Amelia Lena Stevens. Love her. And I'm grateful for her. This is actually my mother with her mother when they were younger. Those pictures feel tender to me to see and have been sweet to look at as I've prepared this presentation. Grandma would also very frequently go back to that floor to ceiling window and look at her reflection and very lovingly tell the woman to come inside. Come on in, she would say. Come in, come on. Can you relate to this? I sure can. Sometimes it feels hard to differentiate between reality and what we perceive. Much of the peace or pain that we feel comes from how we perceive or view our experiences. Hiram Smith, co-founder of Franklin Covey, wrote a book titled Pain is Inevitable, Misery is Optional. What does that mean and how does it look in caregiving? The inevitable pain in caregiving is that sometimes someone we love is not the same. They're different. Your relationship is different. I really appreciate the sister that said, he would do this for me. I'm doing this for him. And it's different, right, than what you expected, likely very different. Caring for someone takes time. Often it's time that is taken from others, as suggested in our chat as well, from others that you love or hobbies that you love. It requires, or just from plain sitting down and resting, right? It requires patience that we may not yet have mastered. It's inevitable pain. So why does that inevitable pain feel like misery sometimes? Pain moves to misery when we believe that our circumstances should be different than they are, or we tell ourselves a story about the experience or circumstance. It might sound like this: inevitable pain. My husband was in an accident and has lost mobility of his lower body. This requires me to care for him night and day. Inevitable pain. Optional pain or misery. My husband should not have to go through life without the use of his lower body. He's a man of power and influence, and this will change all of that. This was never meant to be. We can never be really happy again. Can you see how these stories that we tell ourselves would cause truckloads of pain? When our feelings and emotions are driven in life by stories that we believe should be true, yet we have no control over, we will feel miserable and not understand that much of our pain is coming from the story that we are telling ourselves and not the actual experience. Let me give you a few more examples. My wife was, and this is inevitable pain. My wife was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and is unable to care for herself, which means that I am choosing to put some of the things that I enjoy away so that I have more time to care for her. It's inevitable pain, optional pain. My wife was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. It starts out good, but here's where we go awry. We were supposed to grow old together. We were supposed to travel and visit our grandkids together. She was going to drive the cart while I golfed. This isn't fair. We are good people. We shouldn't have to go through this. Misery. I want to be clear. It's not wrong to feel loss around your expectations, but notice the stories and the feelings that come with those thoughts from those stories. They arouse helplessness, loneliness, despair, victim thinking. Another example, my parents' health is deteriorating quickly. They need somewhere to live, and I've chosen to let them live with me. It takes lots of time to sort out their bills, taxes, doctor's appointments, and medications. I feel tired and alone at times. Inevitable pain, optional pain. I am in the prime of my life, and I should not have to be caring for my parents. It's not supposed to be this way. I also feel a ton of stress because I want to do this right, so I don't have any regrets when they are gone. Plus, they are so ungrateful. They get irritated with me often. They have no idea how lucky they are that I'm caring for them. Misery. Tool number 4, no more stories. You have to separate the fact from the fiction, the story. Some of you may say, well, the fact is that I don't want to have any regrets when my loved one passes away. I would say this to you. You are going to have regrets, not necessarily because you did something wrong, but because you are human. Humans make mistakes. You will make mistakes. Humans get tired. Humans are selfish sometimes. Humans fill their days too full. Humans worry about finances and often get short-tempered. It's okay. It's normal. So then what do you do with the regret? Whether you are feeling regret from an incident that happened last night, a thought you had this morning, or you're feeling regret because someone you've cared for is already gone, put it in truth. The truth is, possibly for you, I do wish I had spent more time with my spouse or my mom or my dad, or I wish I'd been more patient with them. And the truth is also, I was tired or hurried or in pain, and I was not able to give all that I wish I could have at that time. I love them. He or she matters very much to me. I will miss him or her. The end. Notice that while we were telling ourselves the truth, we did not allow any stories in, no shaming, just the facts. Tool number 4, no more stories, and separate the truth from the fiction. Anne told me about the first night after she'd moved her mother, Adele, into her home to care for her. Adele turned to her daughter and asked, "Who are you?" "Mom, it's me, Annie, your daughter." "Oh my heck," she said, "how old am I?" I laughed. She laughed when she told me that. Anne had been in a terrible car accident several years earlier, and her parents had moved in with her for about a year so that they could care for her while she recovered. Now the roles were reversed. And we laughed as she shared this experience with me, but I couldn't help but feel tender as I thought of the role reversal. Adele was suggesting that if you're my daughter and you are that old, then how old must I be? Like somehow this is the worst news she'd heard all day. Tool number 5, remember, it's not personal. No matter what they say or do, it's not personal. It's not about you. I once heard Brad Reedy, a well-known psychologist, say that the greatest form of selfishness is to take something personal. I know that's true in my head, but boy, is it hard not to take things personal. Just like Susan was saying in one of our comments as well, that Teflon Tough is a great idea, and it is hard. It is hard. My grandma got mean. When my mom would send me into her apartment to vacuum her rugs, she would scream at me and tell me to get out. As a young girl, I thought that was rude. And I took it personal. I wanted to tell her that I wanted to get out, but my mom was making me vacuum her rugs first. Pam, one of those who shared in that sacred conversation we had about caregiving, is caring for her parents from a distance. They are capable of taking care of themselves. And at times, sometimes it feels a little sketchy for her. They have needs and she's not right next to them to fulfill all of them for them. It would be very easy for her to take personal some of their choices. She gives them great suggestions and then they do whatever they want. Their choices affect her. I've watched her choose not to take it personal. A tool for lasting peace is to commit to never take anything personal, but especially with those that we are caring for. I will say, I know that I said it earlier, but that is hard to do, but I'm working on it and I'm going to work on it till I'm 99 or before that. Tool number, yes.
Is this a good time to share a little bit more of what people are saying?
Please, I'd love to hear.
Okay. So one person said, my mom would talk about the insurance agent coming and watching for him all the time. I eventually realized it was because they included a snapshot of him on their mailings. That was cute.
Awesome. That's cute.
One other was just commenting because you, let's see, it says tough starts with feeling because you ground to yourself. When you're grounded in your own self, you're strong. Another says it's so unfair, which is true. We feel that way. Let's see. One says allowing yourself to feel what you feel is the first step because you want to be validated and recognized for how you feel. Once you can do that, you can allow yourself to consider new views, but you want to have your view first, and that's natural.
Yes, beautifully said. Yes.
Yeah. And then there's another comment that from just recent, it says, thank you so much for saying this about feelings of regret. It brought tears to my eyes because of the difficult passing of my husband with early onset dementia. So I appreciate that. And then lastly, one wanted to know if you would define victim thinking again. And if you want to do that at the end or whatever you want to do is fine.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm happy to define it again. Victim thinking is I feel that things are happening to me, that I don't have a choice. And someone might say, no, this is happening. My mother cannot care for herself, or my husband passed away. Like that's real. And that is real. But victim thinking says, I don't get to choose how I feel about it. I don't get to choose how I respond. All these bad things are happening to me instead of I have the power to choose how I want to respond. And I'm hoping with my whole soul, you'll choose to feel the real emotion. We go to victim thinking because we're afraid of feeling the real emotion. We can work through that real emotion. Victim thinking is like we just put it on our back and we haul it around for the rest of our lives until we're willing to just to move it into the real emotion, which is loss, fear, pain, whatever that real emotion is. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for your comments and for your questions. You add a lot to this. Thank you. All right, tool number 6, choose humility and ask for help. Jerry mentioned this in the beginning when she was sharing her part. Ask for help, recognize your limits. Remember, there are resources. There are people that can help you. Eventually, my grandma moved in with us. My parents made a space just for her and called it her apartment. My mom recognized that when grandma was alone in our basement, she would get very sad. And as I mentioned before, sometimes mean and angry. So my mom did her very best to create a schedule for her that included others. She could not be the only one who cared for grandma. My mother had 7 children, 3 or 4 of whom were still living at home when grandma moved in. So she would enlist us kids often to help her. She would also hire university students to come up and read with her. Some of them just read her their homework, but grandma didn't care. It was having a person next to her that mattered. She would sit with her doll in her hands, rocking the doll, humming and singing to it, occasionally turning to whomever was sitting next to her to show them how cute her baby was. They would acknowledge her and validate her and ask her questions. And that would be on repeat, tens, if not hundreds of times in a 3-hour block. The truth is, every relationship needs both distance and connection. Do you listen to your body, to your spirit? Do you give yourself time alone, away? Some may say, I can't afford to go away. I know my mom couldn't. Or I don't have anyone that I can leave them with. My response to that would be, find a way. Maybe your away is to another room. Maybe it's a regular walk each evening. Maybe it's a way in your mind with some mindfulness and meditation. I promise you that if you don't take time for you, you will have less to give to those you are caring for. It's not selfish to say you need time or that you need help. It's human. Finally, tool number 7, be aware of the end, but choose to live in the present. If you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to go somewhere far, go together. As we were winding up the conversation that I told you about earlier with current and past caregivers, Kathleen chimed in again. If someone would have told me that this was going to be a 3-year gig, I would have gladly signed up for it and been grateful for every day I had with my mom. But I had no idea how long it would last. I thought she would live at least 10 more years. It felt scary and daunting. Part of my regret was not taking advantage of the time I had. When we have loved someone and we can see that their life is winding down, it's coming to an end, as all of our lives will do eventually. It's easy to fear the end, or on the flip side, to feel guilty that a part of you hopes for the end to come quickly. Neither of these thoughts or feelings are bad. In fact, they make sense. To be aware of the end, but live in the present is more than just a cute line again. Generally speaking, when we start to feel anxious about something happening too soon or not soon enough, or we start to worry about finances or time management, it's because we've left the present and we're wanting to control something in the future that we have no control over. We can control our own thoughts, our own feelings, and our own behavior. That's all we can control. And when we leave the present thinking about something that we want to control in the future, we leave our ability to choose, especially to choose joy. So in answer to my earlier question, choosing joy is actually just that, a choice. There was much I didn't understand about caregiving as I helped and watched my mom care for my grandma over those 17 years. What I did know then and now, by watching my mother, is that caring for a loved one as they age and experience illness is a very tender, wonderful, and hard experience. I know it because I watched my mother work to fill all of my grandma's waking hours to make her as comfortable as possible. She did this by telling us kids to go down and unfold the towels and put them on the bed so grandma could fold them. I watched her convince my sister to put on her swimsuit with my grandma and convince grandma that they were going swimming so that she would get into the bath. I watched her lovingly and carefully find foods that grandma would eat and clean up messes that my grandma would make. I saw my mom take her to visit friends with her. I saw her go pick my grandma up at the grocery store when grandma had walked there and told the store manager that someone had stolen her car when she couldn't find it in the parking lot. I watched her go down to my grandma's condo and search for her purse that she very often could not find, only to find it in the oven. I watched her smile and laugh and encourage her every single day. I saw her concern when she realized that grandma was getting up in the night and urinating in the heating vent in her room. I watched her put a lock on her door so that she couldn't come into my room at night. And then I watched my mom I think my dad did this, cut a hole in her door so that my mom could make sure that she could see my grandma in her room and that she was okay when she was in there. I watched her take her to our basketball, cheerleading, church, and other events. I watched her tenderly respond when my grandma came up to my mom at a Christmas party and say, "Janet, there's something about Christmas that reminds me of Christ." I could go on and on and on at the impact that watching my mother care for her mother made on me. I learned from this experience and others in my life that pain is inevitable. We are going to have pain, and many will be asked to endure it for long periods of time. But don't ever forget, we get to choose how we want to respond to it. You can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to give time. Caring for another person that cannot care for themselves, I believe, is one of the most genuine, loving gifts that someone can give to another person. And for that reason, I applaud you exactly where you are and how you're choosing to do it. Thank you.